Donald Trump tried to steal our democracy, and he's still trying to do it. For those who do not understand the ramifications of all this, let me paint a picture of what could happen next. Let's say Trump does not get prosecuted for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election, or the prosecution and the trial get delayed beyond 2024, beyond the election, and he becomes president again. Then what happens? Well, there's no real need to guess. He's already telling us.
When I get back into the Oval Office, I will totally obliterate the deep state. They will be obliterated. And we know all the good ones now. 2024 is our final battle. With you at my side, we will demolish the deep state. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communists, Marxists, fascists. We will throw off the sick political class that hates our country.
Now, these are not empty words. The ex-president and his allies have specific plans, as the New York Times reports, for a, quote, sweeping expansion of presidential power, end quote, and, quote, to bring independent agencies under presidential control. Donald Trump tried to destroy our democracy, and if he's not prosecuted and reelected, he's likely to try to finish the job. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a professor of history at New York University. She's the author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. She joins me now. Ruth, let's just start with this reporting in the New York Times, that there's actually a plan in motion, not just to obliterate the deep state or cleanse it or whatever he says. It's to actually expand presidential power. Now, again, you're an historian. You've seen that when we move from democracy to autocracy around the world and throughout history, this is part of the playbook.
Yeah, in fact, the essence of authoritarianism is the executive branch that becomes so powerful that it overwhelms the judiciary representation and takes away independence. So I looked at that reporting. It was quite chilling to hear Trump's former director of the Office of Management and Budget say, we're looking for pockets of independence to seize them.
Wow.
So what he's saying is that they're going to obliterate the idea of independent institutions, of neutrality of institutions and agencies. And using the word seize is very interesting. That's not the language of democratic reform. Right. That's the language of autocratic takeover.
Independence. I mean, we celebrate Independence Day. It's one of our biggest things. The concept of independence in government, the concept of the independence of our branches of government. This has now become the kind of thing that Donald Trump says we can't have too much of this. We can't have this independence running around. We need my view of the world. At some point, why does this not stop in its tracks with those people who are at his rallies saying, "Wait a second, that's not what I want. I don't want you to trample over independence in America"?
Because Donald Trump is very different than other politicians. He's a cult leader. And he set up this narrative, both the narrative of his victimhood, that he's the victim of the deep state, and that he's actually protecting them. So he set that up. He's also set up for many years that the judiciary, the Department of Justice, the press, all of these people are partisan and out to get him. And so everything that happens, every time he's targeted, they believe this is this is how conspiracy theory works. They believe it's a fulfillment of what their worst fears. And that's why they're not going anywhere. And that's why with each indictment, his popularity either stays the same or rises.
Right. And what we've seen is whenever it gets prosecuted and he doesn't like it, he calls the prosecutors names. He calls everybody names. It's all a witch hunt. And he motivates people against them. But he didn't do that this weekend. He talked about Aileen Cannon, his judge in the Mar-a-Lago case, and what a patriot she is and how we need more like her. What was that dog whistle all about?
I see this knowing how authoritarians use public appearances to levy veiled threats. This was a reminder to the judge to stay on track, and it was a reminder to all other judges that this is what he expects of them. Because what we're talking about here is a reshaping of government so that loyalty is all that matters, not professionalism, not expertise. You know, there are people who say, well, yeah, we need more efficient government, smaller government. But that's not what Donald Trump's saying here. In fact, he said he's going to be purging the sick political class that hates our nation. He's telling us that political attributes are going to be what decides who survives and who has to leave. And that's authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's important to note for conservatives, it's not about small government. He's not talking about the size of government. He's talking about controlling the various aspects and levers of government.
Yes, and the end game of all of this is survival of Donald Trump. And, you know, authoritarians are not like other leaders. Most people would not want to run for office if they're under investigation. Well, that's not how these guys roll. Right? Putin, Trump, Netanyahu, Berlusconi, they all run for office.
Right.
The goal is to get to power and do autocratic capture of the judiciary especially, so that you can become untouchable, so that you never have to worry about an indictment, an investigation again, because you control the government.
So what happens now if this, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the trial gets delayed or the trial takes too long or that Donald Trump gets elected before the end of the trial or that the trial doesn't happen. You know, Donald Trump, you couldn't prosecute when he was president. Now he doesn't want you to prosecute him because he's busy running for president. Then he won't be prosecutable again because he's president again. At some point, this could become very dangerous. America in 2025 could be an entirely different place than it is today.
It is, and I think Americans have to, you know, it's very hard because it's always different in every case. However, in my book, Strong Men, which is 100 years of people going through this, nobody's ever prepared, and they think they're going to be the exception. And they don't listen to the warning signs until it's too late, which is why you and I talk so much.
Right. Right, these are the warning signs. We're yelling them from the rooftops. Yes,
he's being very clear. And one of my maxims from studying this stuff is that authoritarians always tell you what they're going to do.
Yeah.
As a kind of challenge and as a warning. And people don't listen until it's too late.
There's no particular benefit to thinking that when he becomes president, this will all not happen, because we spent 4 years thinking once he's president, he'll become more presidential. He's basically telling you what he's going to do.
He will be finishing the job that he started. And by the way, that's not just destroying democracy internally. That is also, Donald Trump always had two aims. One was domestic. The other was to take America out of the realm of democratic internationalism and align it with autocracies.
Yeah.
And that will happen as well.
All right, well, if that happens, Ruth Ben-Ghiat and I will continue our conversations. We will join you from Canada. Thanks, Ruth. Good to see you.